You know, breaking the fourth wall can do a lot more for your game than just a quick little joke. I'm sure when you think of games that break the fourth wall, some of these are what comes to mind. Well, I want to talk about how games can take those ideas and elevate them to heights that movies, plays, and literature just can't. So I've been watching Nathan Fielder's The Rehearsal. It's an HBO comedy series that, well, it goes layers and layers deep with its meta.
I don't really like lying to people.
You're a liar.
Yeah, neither do I.
And at the same time, I just recently played through Inscryption, so my mind has gone just, I don't know, full meta. Inscryption, if you don't know, is an indie darling roguelike deck builder that quickly turns trippy, just confusing as hell. And, well, that's all I'm going to say about Inscryption. I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't played it, but if you have, drop me a comment, let's chat about it in the comments. But Inscryption reminded me a lot of the experience I had with Daniel Mullins' last game, Pony Island, which is just, well, that's why I need to talk about meta-narrative today. So Pony Island is a sort of adventure game where early on, you'll meet a character who is desperately trying to stop you from playing Pony Island. And well, with that alone, the game had its hooks in me. Another game that hits similar notes is There Is No Game, Wrong Dimension, a sometimes point-and-click comedic adventure game that from the moment that you boot up the game is already breaking the fourth wall, telling you to stop playing the game.
Hello, user. Program speaking. Actually, there's no game.
So you jump from one game universe to the next, as the narrator is speaking not to your player avatar, but directly to you. You know, you, the one watching me. And they're trying to convince you that there is no game. Ah, I said the thing. Both of these gaming experiences left such an impact on me. And I want to explore how these games take metafiction and fourth wall breaking to new heights that we just haven't seen in games before. Also, it's going to be impossible to avoid spoilers, so spoiler warning is in effect. So in case you're not sure what it means to break the fourth wall, let me give you an example. Let's say you're watching a theater show. You're enjoying the show, you know, the actors on stage ignore you, of course, that's what they do. They're acting and interacting with each other, surrounded by three walls. But there is a fourth wall, sort of. That last wall exists between the audience and the stage. I mean, yeah, it's invisible, but play along. Breaking that invisible wall, that fourth wall, is when the actors address the audience directly, you know, right to you. Or wait, let me just show you.
Pam?
Hey, Dwight.
That right there, them acknowledging the camera, that's breaking the fourth wall. And you know, video games have been doing the same thing for generations at this point. From simple stuff like Sonic impatiently tapping his foot, or meeting the devs in Pokemon Red and Blue, or Cranky Kong reminiscing about his arcade days. Yeah, you're the original Donkey Kong, that's fine. I'm not gonna go into the DK family tree, that's on you. But those examples are simple, fun little nods to the player. And while I don't think they're bad, they don't really add much to the experience. And to be fair, those are all sort of early to mid-90s examples. But those ideas were later expanded with moments like this.
What if the game gets delayed? You don't want this to become No More Heroes Forever, do you?
Don't you think you've seen enough?
And then things change significantly with this moment.
I can see into your mind.
Which is arguably the best fourth wall breaking in all of video games. Psycho Mantis from Metal Gear Solid threatens that he can read your mind, which meant that he could actually read your PS1 memory card, and if you had saved data from other Konami games, he would recite those back to you. Super freaky. And best of all, this moment.
Put your controller on the floor. Put it down as flat as you can. That's good. Now I will move your controller by the power of my will alone.
That was completely groundbreaking at the time. Control Rumble was a new thing for games, and for it to be used in this way was unheard of. And it doesn't end there. Psycho Mantis can predict your every move, every attack, which means it's actually impossible to even touch him. That is, unless, of course, you can cut off that telekinesis link. So how do you do that? Well, Kojima makes you physically get up and plug your controller into the second controller port, cutting off that original link. See, this is why Psycho Mantis is revered as not only one of the best bosses in Metal Gear, but in gaming in general. And if you agree, then hey, we've got similar tastes. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can see the next videos I'm making. And since Metal Gear Solid, other devs have taken that influence and created games based around the experience of fourth wall breaking. Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, has sanity effects that completely break your brain. Effects that make you really believe that your TV suddenly turned off, or making you believe that your controller has been disconnected, or worst of all, claiming to delete your save files. Stuff that made 13-year-old me just completely shit my brains. And after that, games like the Stanley Parable and Undertale are built entirely on the idea of breaking the fourth wall, so much so that it becomes metafiction. New term. Alright, let me explain. Metafiction is the idea that when a narrative is so referential, when it keeps reminding you that you are indeed watching a movie or reading a book or playing a game, that it becomes metafiction. Which brings us full circle back to Pony Island and There Is No Game. Two games with games within their own games. Does that make sense? Here, let me show you. So within Pony Island, you know, the game that you boot up from Steam, there's this endless runner game called Pony Island. And with There Is No Game, you play through a collection of different games, stuff like Brick Breakers, 90s point-click adventure games, Zelda-likes, and more. But when it comes to these two games, the rules and their understandings you have about the games within the games are flipped upside down. It really makes you pause in confusion when you're playing. And throughout the games, you have a narrator there pushing up against you, trying to convince you to stop playing the game, that nothing good will come of it.
You can quit. There's nothing to do here. Really.
Acting as some sort of an unreliable narrator.
The title.
Metafiction. The game itself becomes a game about games. No, not you, Frankie. We're done with you. Come on. Patricia Waugh wrote about metafiction and said this: Metafiction is a term given to fictional writing which self-consciously and systematically draws attention to its status as an artifact in order to pose questions about the relationship between fiction and reality. As you explore metafiction stories, you're able to form bonds with the characters on a potentially deeper level than with traditional storytelling. Take, for example, The Last of Us Part 2, a game with characters so deeply defined going through heart-wrenching stories. You, the player, have the agency to move the characters from one plot point to the next, forming your own emotional bonds with the characters and their interconnected relationships. But when it comes to metafiction, the characters and their story arcs are so intrinsically tied to you directly, not only as a player, but your person. It makes you reevaluate the way you perceive relationships with these fictional characters. It's just a little more real. Pony Island ends with Hopeless Soul, the game's only empathetic character, asking this of you. I felt completely torn. The whole time, Hopeless Soul was pushing me towards the end of the game, knowing it was the only way for me, actually me, David, to delete the game from my hard drive and in turn, saving Hopeless Soul. I mean, I beat the game, I was done with it. I would have uninstalled it at some point, maybe in a few days, a few weeks, a few months. I mean, it doesn't matter, it's deleting a game. But now this usually thoughtless task has weight behind it. I don't want Hopeless Soul to die. I grew really attached to them, but at the same time, I want to save their soul, and this is something that they want me to do for them. And so I did it. I deleted the game and any saved data from my PC, saving Hopeless Soul and leaving me with this sense of remorse and guilt for killing my friend. I had ended my friend's life, but in order to save them. And with There Is No Game, after defeating Mr. Glitch, the game's antagonist, and finally reuniting the two lost lovers, the game offers you a choice. If you really want, you can finally play the game that was promised within the game, but at the risk of Mr. Glitch coming back to destroy all of humanity. Or your other choice, similar to Pony Island, deleting the source code, ending the lovers' lives. But this button also has half a dozen arrows pointing to it, as if that's the correct choice. But There Is No Game has taught me for hours to do basically the opposite of what they ask of me. Again, feeling this multi-layered internal conflict. So naturally, I chose to do the opposite of what the game asks of me. I chose to play the game. Big mistake, Mr. Glitch is back.
Hello. Ha! I knew it!
These two games have fourth wall breaking and metafiction so ingrained in their DNA that it becomes unperceivable over time. I mean, at first it's used in ways that were familiar, sort of jokes or setups, in a way to sort of onboard you to the mayhem that you're about to experience. But by the end of the game, you're so deep in the metafiction that it's unrecognizable. And now you've developed this sort of attachment to the characters who've been interacting with you directly. These games' characters go through similar story arcs alongside you as well. At first, you really don't know who to trust. Like, is what you're doing actually helping, or is it making things worse for everyone? You can't trust anyone. But as the stories progress, that's when you discover who truly needs your help and who's using you to cause mayhem. So instead of traditional storytelling where you might play as Link, out there to put a stop to Ganon and rescue Princess Zelda, here you are Link. You know who the threat is, you know who needs your help, and there's no one else there to interfere. So it's your job to step into the role of the hero and become Link. Crazy, right? Metafiction and player agency at this level is something that you can't experience in most games. And at that point, no other medium. It makes for seriously unforgivable experiences. So we've seen a huge increase in metafiction games, especially with the rise of indies. It's easy and fun to break the fourth wall with some cultural references or inside jokes, but it's been proven how much higher the concept can be taken when games dedicate an entire experience based around that metafiction. Both with their game mechanics, but especially with their characters building a relationship with you, the person behind the controller. So is there another topic or another game genre that I should do a deep dive on? Let me know, drop a comment, make sure to like the video and subscribe to us so you don't miss that upcoming video. I've been David with the GDWC. Thanks so much for watching.